I walked into the Monday leadership meeting clutching my laptop, ready to present the product I'd spent 6 months building. My name is Samantha Winslow, and I'm 33 years old. I worked as a senior project manager at Dovetail Systems, a mid-sized software firm in Seattle. That morning, I'd arrived early, rehearsing my pitch one last time. This presentation was everything: 6 months of late nights, countless revisions, research that made my eyes blur. I'd poured my heart into this project, and today was supposed to be my moment to shine. The glass-walled conference room gleamed in the morning light as I set up my slides. My boss, Jonathan Pike, sat at the head of the table with his usual confident smirk. 8 other executives filled the remaining chairs, sipping coffee and scrolling through their phones. I connected my laptop to the display screen, my hands steady despite my nerves. Then Jonathan cleared his throat and stood up. "Before we begin," he said, his grin widening, "I have an announcement about strategic restructuring." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone made the air feel wrong. Then I saw Evan Pike, Jonathan's nephew, slide into the empty chair beside him, the chair that should have been mine. Jonathan kept talking, but his words became muffled in my ears. "Business decision," he said. "New direction for the team." Around the table, executives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes just like they'd avoided looking at anyone about to be executed. Then Jonathan clicked to my presentation slides, the ones I'd sent him yesterday for review, and began presenting them as if they were his nephew's work. "Evan's been developing this innovative approach," Jonathan announced, gesturing to my charts, my data, my months of work. My project, my baby, was suddenly being introduced as Evan's new initiative. I stood frozen at the side of the room, still holding my laptop. Evan looked nervous but tried to appear confident, nodding along as Jonathan praised ideas that had come entirely from my brain. My face burned hot. My hands trembled around my coffee cup. When Jonathan finally acknowledged me, it was with a dismissive wave. "Samantha, we're restructuring your role out of the organization. You'll be fine, Sam. You always land on your feet." Laughter, uncomfortable, forced laughter, rippled through the room. I forced a smile, nodded politely, and walked out before anyone could see my eyes water. I spent the next hour packing my desk in complete silence. The office smelled like burnt coffee and warm printer ink, familiar scents that now felt poisonous. My hands moved automatically, placing framed photos into a cardboard box, unplugging my phone charger, collecting the small succulent plant my friend had given me last Christmas. People walked past my cubicle, their footsteps quick, their eyes fixed straight ahead. Nobody stopped to say goodbye or offer sympathies. They all knew what had happened, and they all wanted to avoid becoming collateral damage. As I taped up my box, I glanced back toward the conference room one last time. Through the glass walls, I could see Evan sitting at the computer, showing my slide deck to someone on a video call. My slide deck. With his name on it now. My stomach twisted violently. I wanted to scream, to march back in there and expose them both. Instead, I picked up my box, walked to the elevator, and left Dovetail Systems without saying another word. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened to my career, my project, my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:37 in the morning, I lay in bed scrolling through LinkedIn on my phone, torturing myself by looking at company updates. Then I saw it, a post from Dovetail Systems' official account. Excited to unveil our newest innovation in project management software, led by Evan Pike. Proud of our team's forward-thinking approach. Below the text was a photo of Evan standing in front of my presentation slides, looking proud and accomplished. My face flushed hot in the darkness of my bedroom. I checked the engagement, 342 likes already. Dozens of congratulatory comments. Impressive work, Evan. This is exactly what the industry needs. Brilliant strategy. My work. My innovation. My 6 months of research and development. And my name had been completely erased, replaced with someone who'd contributed absolutely nothing. I almost commented right then, almost typed out the truth for everyone to see. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, shaking with rage. But something stopped me. Something quieter and more strategic than my anger. I whispered aloud to my empty bedroom, "No. Not like this." I closed LinkedIn and opened my laptop instead. I created a new folder and labeled it simply, Rebuild. Then I started planning. The next morning, I woke up with clearer purpose. Anger still burned inside me, but it had transformed into something more useful, determination. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and a blank notebook, sketching out possibilities. What if I started my own consulting business? Small, lean, ethical, everything Dovetail pretended to be but wasn't. I had expertise they couldn't steal. I had years of relationships with clients who trusted my work, not the company logo. I made a list of every professional contact I'd built over the past decade. Former clients who'd praised my problem-solving skills. Colleagues who'd left Dovetail for other companies. Industry connections I'd met at conferences. Each name represented a potential opportunity, a thread I could pull to start rebuilding my career. The idea felt terrifying and freeing at the same time. I'd never run my own business before. I'd always worked within corporate structures, following someone else's rules, building someone else's company. But maybe that had been my mistake. Maybe I'd been giving my best work to people who'd never valued it properly. I pulled out my phone and started drafting emails. Casual, professional messages reaching out to old contacts. Coffee sometime? I'm exploring new opportunities and would love to catch up. One email at a time. One small step toward rebuilding everything they'd taken from me. Over the next 2 weeks, I had 11 coffee meetings. I drove across Seattle meeting former colleagues, past clients, and industry friends at small cafes and quiet restaurants. Each conversation started casually, but I always steered it toward business eventually. "I'm actually starting my own consulting firm," I'd say, keeping my tone confident despite the fear churning in my stomach. Focusing on project management solutions for mid-sized tech companies. Most people seemed genuinely interested. Some even seemed relieved. "I always thought you were the real talent behind Dovetail's success," one former client told me, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Jonathan's good at talking, but you were the one who actually delivered results." Those words felt like oxygen after drowning. Someone remembered. Someone knew the truth. By the end of my second week of unemployment, I had 3 serious leads, companies interested in hiring me as a consultant for specific projects. Nothing huge yet, but it was a start. Real opportunities built on my actual reputation, not stolen credit. I registered my business officially, Winslow Consulting LLC. The paperwork felt both mundane and monumental. I was really doing this. Building something entirely mine that nobody could take away or put someone else's name on. My first real contract came from a company called TechBridge Solutions. Their operations director, a woman named Carla Hughes, had worked with me years ago on a difficult system integration. "You saved us back then," she said during our meeting. "When I heard you'd gone independent, I knew I wanted to work with you again." The project was modest, helping them restructure their workflow systems, but it paid $4,800. Not enough to live on long term, but proof that I could actually do this. That my skills had value beyond whatever Jonathan Pike said about me. I worked harder on that project than I'd worked on anything at Dovetail. Every detail perfect, every deadline met early, every communication clear and professional. When I delivered the final report 3 weeks later, Carla sent me an email that made me tear up. "This is exceptional work, Samantha. You've exceeded every expectation. We'll absolutely be hiring you again." I sat at my kitchen table, my makeshift office, staring at that email for a long time. Then I whispered to myself, "Game on." This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about proving that I didn't need Dovetail systems, didn't need Jonathan's approval, didn't need anyone's validation except my own. I reinvested the entire payment into my business, better software, professional website design, marketing materials. No shortcuts, no pettiness. Just quality work and steady growth. For the next few months, I kept my head down and focused on building. I took contracts that other consultants might have considered too small or too tedious. But each one added to my portfolio, each one proved my reliability, each one connected me to new potential clients. By October, 3 months after being fired, I had 5 active clients. Winslow Consulting was actually working. I wasn't rich, but I was paying my bills and building something real. Then one afternoon, I got a text message from a former coworker who still worked at Dovetail, a designer named Troy who I'd always gotten along with. Thought you should know, Evan completely botched the client presentation to Anderson Industries yesterday. Total disaster. But here's the worst part, Jonathan's telling everyone it's because you designed the system poorly before you left. The text included a screenshot of an internal email where Jonathan blamed foundational issues from previous management for the project's failures. Previous management meant me. They were rewriting history, making me the scapegoat for Evan's incompetence. My hands clenched around my phone. This was Jonathan's tactic, protect himself and his nephew by throwing someone else under the bus, even someone who wasn't there anymore to defend themselves. I saved that screenshot carefully. I didn't know exactly why yet, but instinct told me I might need evidence of their lies someday. The anger that text message reignited was different from the hot rage I'd felt the day I was fired. This was colder, more strategic. I stared at that screenshot for a long time, feeling something crystallize inside me. I won't ruin them, I whispered aloud to my empty apartment. I'll outlast them. That became my new mantra. Not revenge, exactly. Something better. I would simply build something so successful, so undeniable, that their lies and their theft would become irrelevant. By December, Winslow Consulting had 8 clients. Word was spreading in Seattle's tech community that I delivered results Jonathan never could. Former Dovetail clients were quietly reaching out, asking if I'd be interested in working with them. We've been disappointed with their recent performance, one CEO told me carefully, not naming names but clearly referring to the chaos Evan and Jonathan were creating. I took every opportunity that aligned with my values. I worked 12-hour days most weeks, but it didn't feel like the grinding exhaustion I'd experienced at Dovetail. This was my company, my reputation, my future. Every success belonged to me. Nobody could take credit or erase my name from the work I did. By the end of the year, I'd earned more than I'd made in salary at Dovetail, and I was just getting started. In January, I attended a tech industry networking event downtown. The convention center buzzed with hundreds of professionals, all wandering between booths, exchanging business cards, making connections. I'd almost skipped it, worried about running into people from my past. But my business needed visibility, and hiding accomplished nothing. As I walked through the exhibition hall, I spotted a familiar logo, Dovetail Systems. They had a large booth with glossy banners showing their latest projects. Jonathan's face smiled from one banner. Evan's face smiled from another, positioned like they were equals, like Evan had earned his place through talent rather than family connections. I kept walking, intending to pass by without stopping. Then Jonathan caught my eye. He recognized me instantly and that familiar smirk appeared on his face. "Samantha," he called out, loud enough that several people turned to look. "You're still doing the freelance thing?" His tone made it sound small, temporary, beneath someone with real ambition. I stopped and turned to face him, keeping my expression pleasant and professional. "My consulting firm's doing well, actually," I replied calmly. "Growing steadily." Jonathan's smirk widened. "That's great. Really great. For now." The words hung there, dismissive and condescending. For now. Like my success was temporary, like I'd eventually fail and come crawling back. I smiled politely at Jonathan and walked away, my business card still in my pocket. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeming desperate for connections. But as I moved through the crowd, I overheard him talking to other executives near his booth. His voice carried easily across the space. "She's not competition," Jonathan said, laughing. "She's a cautionary tale about leaving stable positions for risky ventures." The words hit me like a blade sliding between my ribs. A cautionary tale. That's how he saw me, not as someone he'd betrayed and stolen from, but as an example of failure, someone to pity or dismiss. I kept walking, my smile frozen in place, but inside something hardened even further. That line would stay with me. I'd remember it every time I felt tired, every time I wondered if building my own company was worth the struggle. Jonathan had just given me fuel that would burn for months. That evening, I worked until 2 in the morning on proposals for 3 new potential clients. Each one represented a company that had previously worked with Dovetail. Each one represented a piece of Jonathan's empire that I could quietly claim for myself. Not through sabotage or lies, but through better work and better ethics. I'd show him exactly what kind of cautionary tale I was becoming. By spring, Winslow Consulting had grown beyond what I'd imagined possible. I'd hired my first employee, a junior analyst named Felix Ortega who I'd once mentored during his internship at Dovetail. "I always learn more from you than anyone else there," he told me during his interview. "When I heard you'd started your own firm, I knew I wanted to work with you if possible." Having Felix join me felt like validation. I wasn't just building a company, I was creating the kind of workplace I'd always wished existed. Fair, ethical, where credit went to the people who actually did the work. My small office space hummed with energy. Felix and I worked side by side. Whiteboards covered with project plans, music playing low in the background, determination electric in the air. We took on challenging projects that Dovetail had failed at, fixed problems Jonathan's team had created, quietly proved ourselves as the better option. Meanwhile, I kept hearing whispers about trouble at Dovetail. Through industry contacts and casual conversations, I learned that client satisfaction had plummeted. Projects were running over budget and past deadlines. Staff morale was terrible, with experienced employees leaving for competitor firms. Jonathan was apparently blaming everyone except himself and Evan for the company's declining performance. None of this gave me satisfaction exactly. But it confirmed what I'd always known: Jonathan's success had never been about his talent. It had been about stealing from talented people like me. In June, exactly 1 year after being fired, I got a message from someone still working at Dovetail. The message was brief but significant. 3 of our biggest clients just pulled their contracts. Anderson Industries, Pacific Systems, and Northbridge Tech. All cited failed deliverables and poor communication. Jonathan's panicking, already laid off 6 people from our team to cut costs. Morale is at rock bottom. I read that message 3 times, processing the information carefully. Dovetail Systems was collapsing under Jonathan's leadership. The company was bleeding clients, losing money, destroying the reputation it had built over years. Part of me wanted to feel victorious. But mostly I felt sad for all the good people still working there, people who'd lose their jobs because of Jonathan's incompetence and ego. A former colleague named Brianna called me that evening. "Samantha, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I have documentation proving Jonathan and Evan have been systematically taking credit for other people's work, not just yours. Multiple projects, multiple employees. It's all there in emails and file histories. I think you should leak it. Expose them publicly. They deserve it." I listened to her speak, feeling the temptation of easy revenge. But I took a breath and said carefully, "If I stoop to his level, I lose the win before I earn it." Integrity had to stay my weapon, not cruelty. One evening in July, I received an unexpected email. The sender was someone named Theodore Blackwell, managing partner at Marble Ridge Capital, an investment group I'd heard of but never worked with. The email was professional and intriguing. "Ms. Winslow, we've been following your consulting firm's growth with interest. Your reputation in the Seattle tech community is impressive. We're currently exploring acquisition opportunities in your industry and would value a conversation with you about the landscape. Would you be available for a confidential meeting?" I stared at that email for several minutes, my heart beating faster. Marble Ridge Capital was serious money. They acquired struggling companies, restructured them, and either sold them for profit or ran them long-term. Why were they contacting me? I wasn't for sale, and my company was too small to interest investors at their level. Unless they wanted something else. Information, maybe, or insights into which companies were vulnerable. I replied professionally, I'd be happy to meet. My calendar is flexible this week. We scheduled a video call for Thursday afternoon. When Theodore Blackwell appeared on my screen, he looked exactly like someone who managed hundreds of millions of dollars, silver hair, expensive suit, calculating eyes that missed nothing. Let me be direct, he said after brief pleasantries. We're eyeing a quiet acquisition of a mid-sized software firm in Seattle. Confidentially, we believe this company is poorly managed but has strong underlying potential. We're looking for someone with industry knowledge to advise us on the opportunity. Theodore continued explaining their interest, but he didn't name the company they were targeting. For confidentiality reasons, I can't disclose the specific firm yet, he said. But I can tell you it's a project management software company with approximately 40 employees, annual revenue around $8 million, currently experiencing significant operational challenges. My mind immediately went to Dovetail Systems. The description matched perfectly: size, industry focus, obvious management problems. But I forced myself not to assume. Seattle had multiple companies that could fit that profile. What would this advisory role involve? I asked, keeping my voice professionally neutral. Due diligence support, operational assessment, potentially transition planning if the acquisition proceeds. We'd compensate you well for your time and expertise. I told Theodore I'd need to think about it. After the call ended, I sat staring at my blank computer screen for a long time. If Marble Ridge was targeting Dovetail, and my instincts screamed that they were, this represented an opportunity I'd never imagined. Not just to advise on the acquisition, but potentially to be involved in restructuring the company that had fired me. Was that revenge? Or was it justice? I wasn't sure yet. But I knew I needed more information before making any decisions. That evening, I called my mentor, a retired executive named Patricia Finch who'd guided me throughout my career. I explained the situation carefully, without naming companies. Patricia listened thoughtfully as I described the opportunity Marble Ridge had presented. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before responding. This sounds personal for you, she said carefully. Is this about fixing a broken company, or is this about getting back at someone who hurt you? I'd been asking myself the same question. Maybe both, I admitted. Does that make it wrong? Not necessarily, Patricia replied. But you need to be honest about your motivations. Justice isn't revenge when you've earned it through your own merit. If you've built something legitimate, if you have the skills to genuinely help that company succeed, then accepting this opportunity is just good business. But if you're doing it purely to hurt someone, you'll end up hurting yourself too. Her words clarified something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. I want to fix what's broken, I said slowly. I want to prove that companies succeed through ethical leadership, not through stealing credit and nepotism. If that happens to embarrass Jonathan in the process, that's just a side effect. Patricia laughed softly. Then I think you have your answer. 2 days later, Theodore emailed again. This time, the message included a confidential briefing document attached. We're ready to disclose the target company. Please review the attached information and let us know if you're interested in proceeding. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked the attachment. The document loaded slowly, revealing a familiar logo at the top. Dovetail Systems. I stared at that logo for a long time, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dovetail Systems. The company that had fired me, stolen my work, and tried to destroy my reputation was now failing badly enough that investors wanted to acquire it. The briefing document laid out everything in stark financial terms. Revenue down 32% over the past year. Client retention at an all-time low. 6 key employees had resigned in recent months. Operating costs were bloated while productivity had collapsed. The company was hemorrhaging money and reputation simultaneously. Current leadership has created significant operational dysfunction, the report stated clinically. However, underlying client base and intellectual property retain substantial value. With proper management restructuring, company could return to profitability within 18 months. I read that paragraph 3 times. Proper management restructuring. They were planning to replace Jonathan. Marble Ridge wanted to buy Dovetail, remove the toxic leadership, and rebuild it into something functional. And they wanted my help doing it. I thought about walking away. This opportunity felt almost too perfectly aligned with my anger, too much like fate offering me revenge on a silver platter. But Patricia's words echoed in my mind. Justice isn't revenge when you've earned it. I'd built a successful consulting firm through my own work. I had the expertise to genuinely help Dovetail succeed. This wasn't about spite, it was about fixing what Jonathan had broken. I typed my response carefully. I'm very interested in this acquisition opportunity. Let's discuss next steps. Over the following weeks, I became deeply involved in Marble Ridge's acquisition planning. Theodore introduced me to their full team, financial analysts, legal advisors, operational consultants. We met regularly, sometimes in person, sometimes via secure video calls. My role was to provide insider knowledge about Dovetail's operations, client relationships, and personnel. We need someone who understands this company's culture and capabilities, Theodore explained. Someone who can help us separate what's broken from what's salvageable. I walked them through everything I knew. Which clients were loyal to the company versus loyal to specific employees. Which projects had real potential versus which were poorly conceived. Which staff members were talented but trapped under bad leadership. But I made one critical request. I want my involvement kept completely confidential until the deal closes. Jonathan Pike shouldn't know I'm connected to this acquisition. Theodore raised an eyebrow. This is personal. It's strategic, I corrected. If Jonathan knows I'm involved, he'll fight harder or make decisions out of spite rather than business sense. If he thinks you're just another investment group, he'll negotiate rationally. Theodore considered this, then nodded. Fair enough. We'll keep you anonymous. My team will be the visible face of all negotiations. For 2 months, I watched from the shadows as Marble Ridge negotiated with Dovetail's board. I reviewed every financial report, every operational document, every piece of due diligence. And I saw clearly how badly Jonathan had mismanaged everything. My old project, the one he'd stolen and given to Evan, was in complete shambles. They'd implemented it poorly, alienated clients, created technical problems that should never have existed. It was almost sad seeing my beautiful work destroyed by incompetence. As the acquisition process continued, I occasionally wondered if what I was doing was too vindictive, too personal. Late one night, I sat in my office staring at Dovetail's financial reports, feeling uncertain. Was I really doing this to help a struggling company? Or was I just dressing up revenge in business language? I called Patricia again, needing her perspective. I'm having doubts, I admitted. Maybe this is too personal. Maybe I should step back and let Marble Ridge handle it without me. Why? Patricia asked simply. Tell me what you're actually planning to do if this acquisition happens. I thought carefully before answering. I want to restructure their operations properly. Fire the managers who've been toxic, including Jonathan. Rehire the talented people who left. Restore the ethical culture that should have existed. Actually deliver quality work to clients instead of making empty promises. And does that help the company? Yes. Absolutely. Does it help the employees who are suffering under bad leadership? Yes. Does it help the clients who've been receiving poor service? Yes. Patricia's voice was firm but kind. Then stop questioning your motivations. You're not burning down a company out of spite. You're fixing what's broken. The fact that it also corrects an injustice done to you doesn't make it wrong, it makes it appropriate. This is what justice looks like, Samantha. Not revenge. Justice. Her words settled something inside me. She was right. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about making things right. In October, Marble Ridge finalized their offer to acquire Dovetail Systems. The board scheduled a signing meeting for the last Friday of the month. According to Theodore, Jonathan had been told only that the buyer was a private investment group interested in the software sector. He didn't know which group, didn't know who was behind it, didn't know anything except that they were offering enough money to save the company from complete collapse. He's actually pretty excited about it, Theodore told me during one of our preparation calls. He thinks he's going to cash out while keeping his CEO position. He's been bragging in emails about finally having real capital to work with. I felt a small, cold smile form on my face. Jonathan's confidence, as always, was his weakness. He'd convinced himself that he was too valuable to replace, that any investor would recognize his leadership as essential. He had no idea what was coming. The signing meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on Friday morning. I'd be there, but Jonathan didn't know that yet. As far as he understood, he'd be meeting with Theodore Blackwell and the Marble Ridge Capital team. Nobody had mentioned that the lead operational consultant would be sitting at that table. The day before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I might say, how I might react when I saw Jonathan's face change from confidence to recognition to disbelief. But I also kept hearing Patricia's words, "Stay professional. This is business. Don't gloat. Just be better than he ever was." That became my mantra for the night. Be better. Be professional. Let the situation speak for itself. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in my best suit, dark gray, professional, expensive. I wanted to look successful, powerful, like someone who belonged at an acquisition negotiation table. I arrived at the office building where the meeting was scheduled 30 minutes early. Theodore met me in the lobby. "Ready?" he asked, studying my face. "This is going to be dramatic." "I'm ready," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. We took the elevator to the 14th floor. The conference room was the same glass-walled space where I'd been humiliated and fired 16 months ago. The symmetry felt almost poetic. Jonathan sat at the conference table, looking confident and relaxed. Evan sat beside him, looking young and out of place. 3 board members occupied other seats, all looking tired and desperate. Theodore entered first, exchanging professional greetings with everyone. Then I walked in behind him. The moment Jonathan looked up and saw me, his entire expression froze. His confident smirk died in real time. His face went through several emotions rapidly: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally something that might have been fear. "Samantha?" he said, his voice cracking slightly. What are you doing here?" I walked calmly to the table and set down my leather folder. Theodore gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Ms. Winslow is our lead operational consultant for this acquisition. She'll be instrumental in the restructuring process." The silence in that room could have cracked steel. Jonathan stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't quite form words. Evan looked between his uncle and me, clearly lost. The board members exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable, others looking almost satisfied. "You can't be serious," Jonathan finally managed. "You're telling me that she," he pointed at me, his hands shaking slightly, "is behind this acquisition?" "Ms. Winslow is our operational consultant," Theodore repeated calmly. "Marble Ridge Capital is the acquiring entity. But yes, she's been advising us throughout this process and will be involved in transition planning." I met Jonathan's eyes steadily. For 16 months, I'd imagined this moment. I'd fantasized about saying something cutting, something that would hurt him the way he'd hurt me. But now, sitting here in this room where he'd destroyed my career, I realized I didn't need to wound him with words. My presence was enough. So I simply set my folder down carefully and said clearly, "You don't get to narrate my life for me. Not anymore." The words hung in the air. Jonathan's face went red, then pale. Every executive in the room was watching him crumble, watching him realize that the woman he dismissed as a cautionary tale had just become his new boss. Theodore opened his briefcase and pulled out the acquisition documents. "Shall we proceed with the signing?" The acquisition closed within 3 weeks. Marble Ridge Capital officially purchased Dovetail Systems, and the restructuring began immediately. My role transformed from consultant to operational director, overseeing the transition. One of my first actions was reviewing personnel files and management structures. Jonathan Pike was terminated as CEO with a severance package that was legally required but not generous. Evan Pike resigned before he could be fired, quietly disappearing from the company roster. I didn't take pleasure in their departures, but I didn't feel guilty either. They destroyed something good through their incompetence and dishonesty. Removing them was simply necessary for the company's survival. Within the first month, I rehired 3 talented employees who'd left during Jonathan's disastrous leadership. Felix moved from my consulting firm to become a full-time senior analyst at Dovetail. We promoted people based on actual merit rather than family connections. We also reached out to clients who'd canceled their contracts, explaining the leadership change and offering to rebuild trust. Many agreed to give us another chance, curious about whether the company could recover. The cultural transformation happened faster than I'd expected. Without Jonathan's toxic management style, employees visibly relaxed. People started contributing ideas again, taking initiative, doing creative work instead of just trying to survive. One former coworker, a developer named Keisha, pulled me aside during my second week. "You've made this place human again," she said simply. "Thank you." Over the next 6 months, Dovetail systems transformed completely. We restructured the project management software that Jonathan and Evan had butchered, rebuilding it properly based on my original vision. We launched it successfully with 3 pilot clients, receiving positive feedback that led to wider adoption. Revenue stabilized, then started growing. Client retention improved dramatically. We hired carefully, building a team of talented people who shared our values of ethical work and honest communication. By spring, exactly 2 years after I'd been fired from this company, Dovetail was profitable again. Not wildly successful yet, but stable and growing with genuine potential. More importantly, it had become the kind of workplace I'd always wished existed. One afternoon, I was working in my office when Keisha stopped by with several colleagues. "We wanted to say something," she said, looking slightly nervous. "A bunch of us remember when you worked here before. We saw what Jonathan did to you, how he stole your work, fired you unfairly, blamed you for his failures. We didn't speak up then, and we're sorry for that." I shook my head. "You don't need to apologize. Jonathan created an environment where speaking up felt dangerous. That wasn't your fault." Still, another employee said, "We want you to know that seeing you come back and fix everything, it matters. It shows that eventually, the right people win." Their words meant more than they probably realized. I hadn't been seeking their validation, but receiving it felt like closure on something I hadn't known still hurt. 6 months later, I was sitting in a cafe near my apartment when I saw Jonathan walk in. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his movements slower. He was alone, carrying a newspaper and wearing casual clothes instead of the expensive suits he'd favored at Dovetail. He saw me almost immediately. For a second, I thought he might leave. But instead, he walked over to my table, stopping a few feet away. "Samantha," he said stiffly. I nodded politely. "Jonathan." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I heard the company's doing well under your leadership." "It is." An awkward silence stretched between us. Then Jonathan said quietly, Things should have been different. I made mistakes." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was probably the closest he'd get to admitting wrongdoing. I could have said something sharp, something that put him in his place. But I realized I didn't need to. I'd already won in every way that mattered. "Take care of yourself, Jonathan," I said, not unkindly. He nodded stiffly and walked away to order his coffee. I watched him go, feeling something I hadn't expected, peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd become the person he could never be. I'd built success through integrity instead of theft. I'd created value instead of stealing it. I'd lifted people up instead of tearing them down. As I left the cafe and walked into the bright afternoon, I realized the revenge I'd gotten wasn't about destroying Jonathan. It was about proving that good work and ethical leadership ultimately win. That was the story I'd been writing all along.